The Holy Gospel according to Luke.
Glory to you, O Lord.
On the way to Jerusalem, Jesus was going through the region between Samaria and Galilee. As he entered a village, 10 lepers approached him. Keeping their distance, they called out, saying, "Jesus, Master, have mercy on us." When he saw them, he said to them, "Go and show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were made clean. Then one of them, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. He prostrated himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean? But the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
You may be seated. Today's Gospel lesson is short and sweet. But don't be mistaken or let it fool you. There is still a lot to examine. Personally, one of the most intriguing parts of this story that I noted this time in hearing it is that the lepers were told to go and show themselves to the priests. But they never actually made it to the priests. They were made clean simply by following the command given to them. Other times that I've heard this gospel story, I always pictured that they arrived to the priests, and because they got there and showed themselves, Jesus made them clean, and then the one came back to thank Jesus. However, that's not really the case. The gospel tells us that the 10 lepers simply started toward the priests, and they were made clean as they went. It's also noted at the beginning of the scriptures in verse 11 that Jesus was going through a region between 2 different areas, Samaria and Galilee. He was in an in-between place, which could reference a possible danger because he was traveling. I mentioned before earlier in the Pentecost season after Pentecost that traveling was dangerous. Traveling on the road was dangerous because people made money by beating up travelers and robbing them. The in-between times in our life can be mixed. There might be really horrible events, low lows, loss, worry and anxiety, confusion, fear, and needing to make really difficult decisions. There might also be in-between times when we are at peace, carrying on as almost we're unaffected or unaware of difficulties, just plugging along, trying to get to the next thing. In-between times, though, more often than not, come with challenges. And often once we get to that final destination, we find ourselves more in the place that I described, feeling at peace and moving along. As we live our lives and we experience more and more, we come to more and more in-between places. In between crawling and walking, in between high school and college, in between single, married, or divorced, in between pregnancy and new life, in between work and retirement, in between moving and unpacking, in between life and death. The question we are posed with today is, who do we cling to on the journey? Do we turn back around and thank God for being present with us along the way? When we are struggling with anxiety, fear, confusion, or the unknown after that in-between stage, who do we turn to for support? Christ is there waiting for us. God is with us through it all. And our faith can make us well. The hard part, though, is that we have to be open to asking for help, relying on others sometimes to provide us care, and making room for support even when we are hurting. Many times we put up walls in our pain or discomfort because we are ashamed or embarrassed. But when we let down those walls, we open ourselves up to the healing movement of the Holy Spirit. It's hard to open ourselves up. We might be worried of being judged, or maybe we've been made to believe in another setting that being vulnerable and truthful with what we are going through just makes matters worse. But the truth is, this is a safe place. Church has often been a place with an expectation of showing up as your best self, dressed in your Sunday best, smiling and happy, putting on a good face, often making church a place that isn't actually safe to be your full, authentic self. When in actuality, church should be a place that we can show up as our most vulnerable and true selves. And it's our job, all of us together, to create a space where it doesn't matter if you show up clean and in sweats, or dirty and in the best clothes you could find, or anywhere in between. When a stranger to us walks in the door, we can immediately judge, or we can take a second to see them as the child of God that they are. So I want to take a second for us to show our vulnerable selves to one another right now. And don't worry, my introverts, you don't have to talk to anyone. All you have to do is raise your hand. And remember, this is an exercise in being vulnerable. And I also want to say that in this moment, if you are vulnerable, and it's really imperative that I know about it, or that you could use some pastoral care, please reach out to me separately, because I might not see your hand go up and know that it's as important as it might be. I don't want to miss anything. So, I invite you to raise your hand if in this past week you have felt lost. Lost. If you have felt lost. Thank you. Raise your hand if in this past week you have struggled with anxiety. Not alone. Raise your hand if in this past week you have struggled with depression. Raise your hand if in this past week you have wondered when the next shoe will drop, because things seem just a little too okay right now. Raise your hand if in this past week you have been pretty happy. Raise your hand if in this past week you have been annoyed with another person. Raise your hand if in this past week you have felt stressed more often than not. Raise your hand if in this past week you thought negative thoughts about yourself. One more. Raise your hand if you have felt God's presence with you this past week. Thank you for being vulnerable with me and with one another. And obviously there are so many more of these that we could add to the list. My hope is that in this exercise we recognize that we are not alone. That sometimes when we are in those places, we feel alone. We all go through stages of in-between times, though. And when we are in them, it can be really difficult to stop, turn around, and notice who is with us on the journey. We journey together with one another. And that is one of the blessings of church community, that if we're doing it sort of right, because we're human and nothing's ever going to be perfect, by creating a safe space to show up as our whole selves, we get to journey with each other. Unfortunately, we all fall short of caring for others, especially when we're going through a difficult stage ourselves. We judge and we make assumptions about other people, when in actuality, we're more alike than we think. But the really good news when we need it. Christ is present at the beginning, through the whole middle, including all the in-between places, and at the end of our journeys. So I invite you to go forward from this place, trusting that your faith will make you well, no matter where your journey leads. Amen.